Cyril Ramaphosa was born on the 17th of November in 1952 in Soweto, near Johannesburg. Both his parents were from Venda descent, and his father was a retired policeman. He was the middle one of 3 siblings. Now, the Venda people were celebrating for a couple of days when Cyril Ramaphosa was inaugurated as the President of South Africa, because the son of the Venda tribe has made it to the position of first citizen. Cyril went to primary and high school in Soweto and later moved to the Mpapuli High School, where he matriculated in 1971. This high school is in Venda. In this high school, Cyril was very good at dancing, at debating, and he was also the head of the Christian Association at the school. This association was called the Student Christian Movement. So this was a movement to empower students to actually become Christians, and was probably his first involvement in trying to recruit people to a way or method of thought. Seems like Cyril was one of those really good students, one of those people you would want your kids to be friends with. Now, in school, he obviously tried to be exemplary, and by his history, it seems that he was. After school, things, however, started to degenerate the moment he enlisted to actually go to university and start studying law. He enlisted at the University of the North in the Limpopo province at Turfloop in 1972. So he didn't waste any time after school and decided to get into academic studies to further his career in law. As we know, universities today and for a long period of time, especially since the 70s, have become political propaganda tools to actually drive certain political ideology. And most students are involved in organizations and activities that has very little to do with academic learning. And in the case of Cyril Ramaphosa, there was no exception to this. Cyril got involved in student politics, and this was the beginning of his downfall. This downfall got worse when he joined the South African Students' Organization, or abbreviated called SASO at the time. And the moment you join any student organization, you meet up with people that are dubious, to say the least, people with different ideologies and people trying to recruit you into different trains of thought. And Marxist ideology was all over university campuses at that stage in South African history, especially at the University of the North. Next, Cyril went and joined the Black People's Convention, the BPC, which is an organization that is race-based, and obviously the first place where Cyril started making choices that got him into a lot of trouble later on. Mixing with the wrong crowd is never a good thing, and Cyril Ramaphosa was detained in 1974 under the Terrorism Act of 1967 for 11 months for actually organizing pro-Frelimo rallies. And Frelimo, many of you may not be familiar with, and I will explain that in detail now so that you understand who and what Cyril Ramaphosa was actually supporting at the time. At the time, in the 70s and even into the 80s, there was a civil war waging within Mozambique, our next door neighbor. And Cyril Ramaphosa at the time decided that he would support Frelimo. Now, Frelimo was a Marxist organization trying to fight for a one-state communist party within Mozambique. And Cyril Ramaphosa organized rallies within South Africa to support this movement. Now, Frelimo used to fight Renamo, which is an organization that believed in capitalism and a free open market. Frelimo at the time was heavily backed by the then USSR, supplying arms, weapons, support, and everything that a real terrorist organization might need to overthrow a democratically elected government. Considering how people look at Cyril Ramaphosa today as a national superhero who has saved people during the COVID-19 pandemic, it must be difficult to understand that your beloved president actually fought for communist terrorists and actually enabled their actions within South Africa, and actually went to prison for 11 months for that action in 1974. But he was not done yet. In 1976, the Soweto uprisings happened, and Cyril Ramaphosa was in the thick of things. Under the Terrorism Act, he was arrested again and sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, where he was in solitary confinement at John Vorster Square. This must have obviously affected Cyril Ramaphosa greatly, as during this time, often people were interrogated and often tortured in ways that has been hidden, and those files have not been made public in the post-democracy era after 1994. So Cyril hasn't spoken out about what happened to him at the time, but he obviously was affected by what transpired in 1976, that detainment under the Terrorism Act at the time, and most of that history has been scrubbed from the internet. And I know that this happened just before he was elected as President of South Africa, because just before that time, when I went to look for specific files on him, I noticed that most of those have been removed from the net, or access to them have been removed. So there's been a very big cleanup operation into Cyril's history, and it's difficult to get access to that now. Fortunately, I had access to that before, and many of those files saved in a safe place for safe access. After being detained for 6 months in solitary confinement, it can change a person. And I think he decided that it's time that he just gets on with normal business as usual. And he became a law clerk at a local firm of attorneys and started a career while continuing his legal studies. Through doing these legal studies, he later obtained his B.Proc degree through UNISA, but only much later in 1981, considering that he started his studies in 1976. It took him 5 years to actually get to that point. So there must have been a lot happening during that time, and that history, once again, is very much obscured, and only the people close to him at the time will be able to tell you what actually transpired. But as we know, most of these people today are tight-lipped in what happened within the ANC and all of those movements during that time period. After obtaining his degree and getting his legal qualifications, Cyril Ramaphosa then went on to become a legal counsel for the Council of Unions of South Africa, or CUSA at the time. CUSA would later join NUM, which is a union that Cyril decided to start for mine workers at the time. The National Union of Mine Workers was Cyril Ramaphosa's brainchild, and this is where the Oppenheimers got strongly involved in the life of this young man that was destined for stardom. Ramaphosa at this stage still couldn't keep himself out of trouble, and he was arrested again for organizing a meeting while the local magistrate didn't give permission for the meeting to go ahead. This was obviously a meeting to recruit mine workers to these unions. He was arrested and detained again. Cyril must have been getting sick of the apartheid government system at the time, and he must have really hated being treated the way that most of them were in prison. Remember this, because this will become very important if you start to understand the man, the time that he will take, the patience that he will have to actually get exactly what he wants. And this will become clear as we continue throughout this video. You cannot know Cyril Ramaphosa and not understand that unions are synonymous with his name. As the founder of the National Union of Mine Workers, it is important to understand the history that this party not only played in unionization of mine workers, but also in the political landscape of the country at the time. Ramaphosa became the first secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers that he founded in December of 1982. He was also the organizers of the first organization to form COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, which would obviously have a huge impact on the South African economy, on South Africa as a whole, and especially South African politics up until this very day. Cyril was also the person that delivered the keynote address at the first big COSATU rally in 1985 in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. It didn't take long for these union workers and these union leaders to get involved in ANC politics. And in 1986, Cyril Ramaphosa was part of a delegation that actually met with the ANC in Lusaka in Zambia. Ramaphosa held the position of First Secretary General of the Union all the way up until 1991, when he was then elected as the Secretary General of the African National Congress. Under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa, the unions that had only 6,000 members in 1982, the union grew all the way in 10 years, 1 decade, to 300,000 members by the year 1992, which was a huge group of support. Obviously, there was financial contributions, and this union had immense power within the mining industry. He was the person that made all this happen. So Ramaphosa knew how to be a mover and a shaker and how to recruit people. He was very good at this. By 1992, this 300,000 strong workforce that were all union members gave him basic control of just about half of the workforce within the mining industry. Now that is massive control and massive influence. This time that Cyril Ramaphosa was involved with the unions, that I would like to focus on, because this was also the starting point of his golden boy moment, when him and Harry Oppenheimer started working together. And this is an inconvenient truth that Cyril Ramaphosa will never be able to shake, and he has been accused of this cooperation by the EFF and many other organizations. It's always nice to haul out the things in the closet when it is nice for you. The EFF having many skeletons in their closet themselves. But Cyril Ramaphosa obviously denied all of these allegations, although the evidence that has been there for many years speak to the contrary. You be the decider. In the time when Cyril Ramaphosa got involved in the unions, there were great problems on the mines. A lot of the people didn't have proper housing, a lot of them were frustrated, and seeing someone rise up to start a union that will actually fight for their rights was something that many people would grab onto. It is important to know that anyone that has vested interest in the mining industry would very quickly take notice of someone like this and their prowess at actually recruiting miners. Now, Cyril Ramaphosa had difficulty actually getting into the hostels where many of these miners live to recruit members, and often he would actually recruit people on the buses as they would be transported to the mines before they would actually enter the mining complexes. This proved to be very successful, but it still hampered what they were busy doing at the time. It didn't take long for Harry Oppenheimer, the mining baron of South Africa, to actually realize that this young man has immense potential, and decided that instead of fighting him, that he should get him on his side. Harry Oppenheimer and Cyril Ramaphosa had many meetings together, and there were many other mining magnates that also wanted Cyril Ramaphosa to stop causing havoc at their mines. One of them was the CEO at the time of Anglo-Val and many other mining companies. But Anglo-Val and Anglo-American were the two big companies, the big players in the mining industry at the time. And having Cyril Ramaphosa on their side, even although they were fighting for position in the mining market, was absolutely crucial. And these mining magnates were willing to stand together to give Cyril Ramaphosa a proposal that he could not refuse. To understand the position of Harry Oppenheimer in this role that he would play in Cyril Ramaphosa's life, it's very important to understand Harry Oppenheimer's role with regards to South Africa on the world stage. The Queen is at the head of a council and a committee that has 300 members from all over the world, the most influential people in various sectors. This committee was a place where the New World Order idea and ideology would not only take shape, but would actually come to fruition through actions and funding to numerous organizations that would implement their actions on the ground. Harry Oppenheimer has been a member of this committee for most of his life. Harry Oppenheimer's son, Nicky Oppenheimer, is currently a member of this committee, and that obviously gives them a very important task within South Africa to ensure that anything to do with the New World Order that needs to be created for the elites, for that to be implemented within our country. And the plans for that New World Order really started taking shape in the early 70s, with meetings that happened throughout South Africa to actually ensure that there is a transition to a government that will actually enable the New World Order sentiments, principles and values to be implemented within the Southern African region. For this New World Order to function, there needs to be a one world government with a one world leader, and there needs to be leaders from each and every continent within the world, and Africa was no exception. The African Union was established so that there could be one leader over Africa. Who is the leader of the African Union currently? Our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Why was it important for him to actually have this position? For this New World Order to be implemented, there needed to be a leader that represented Africa. Therefore, a transition needed to take place in South Africa to elect a leader that could be representative within this New World Order government. It was definitely not going to be the leaders that came before Nelson Mandela. But everyone knew, because of Nelson Mandela's age, that he would not be able to live to the time when the New World Order and all its crony organizations have actually implemented their actions within civil society. A younger politician had to be chosen for the time frame that was laid out for all these actions to take place. Cyril Ramaphosa was the perfect man for the job, and Harry Oppenheimer earmarked him early on with other potential candidates, but it was very clear that Cyril became the super golden boy that would one day head the South African and later the African government within the New World Order. To achieve this transition to a New World Order and to achieve the transition to a new government within South Africa, there was a lot of funding required, and funding cannot just fall out of the sky, so money had to be generated. Money is not something that the Oppenheimers had a lack of. There were also many other influential families within South Africa that became a part of the movement towards this New World Order that would absolutely suit the elites to the T. And Cyril Ramaphosa has been an enabler for them all along the way, and I will show you how that has actually played out. It was very important from the beginning that there was a capitalist transition in the country, that communism cannot be there, but that there is enough communism spoken of in the mainstream media so that the masses of the people would hold on to the hope that a communist system would still be implemented, where most of them will be able to benefit from the proceeds of the land, which is what was sold to them in many meetings, not just on the mines, but in public gatherings all across South Africa. The ANC at this time had become a well-oiled political machine within South Africa. Although the organization was banned, they lived on in many other organizations within the country, and many underground meetings were held and many plans were made, and many of those plans were towards terrorist activity. For Cyril Ramaphosa to become the golden boy of Africa, he could not get involved in any of those dirty activities, and it was very important to be able to get him on the side of the political elite and the world elite. The only way to do this was money, and Cyril took the bait, hook, line and sinker in meetings with the Oppenheimers and some other influential people, a deal was brokered where Cyril Ramaphosa would get shares in Anglo American for the purpose of making sure that the mines can continue operating and that the mine workers would not go on long extended strikes. Because at this stage, Cyril had led some of the longest strikes in the history of South Africa, and it obviously damaged the mines extensively. When he received these shares in Anglo American, which obviously kick-started his rise to fame on the financial side, he was actually paid a salary in lieu of the return on those shares immediately. Now at the time, Cyril wasn't earning a lot of money, there wasn't a lot of income, and this must have been really a helpful thing. And on the side, he could still help grow his union using these funds, and then the funds that he would get from the union itself could help to build the organization, which is the ANC. The ANC needed funding. They got support from the USSR with regards to weapons and so on, especially with Umkhonto we Sizwe. But normal funding in their process towards this transition towards democracy is actually what Ramaphosa was all about. And when the Oppenheimers told him what the actual eventual plans were, he decided that he would get on that team. The Oppenheimers knew that there would be a transition at the time to a new democratic government, that the ANC would come into power, and at that stage they still had to decide which organization this was. But by then the ANC was chosen. The moment the ANC was chosen, the ANC would be funded to do what it takes to actually transition our government to the post-democratic dispensation. So from the beginning, Cyril knew that we were going to transition to a new democratic country. And it must have been difficult for him at that time to say no to this prospect, especially the prospect that he would one day be the leader of that country and later the leader of Africa. You must understand, in the Council and the Committee of 300, these people discuss exactly what will happen in different areas of the globe. And the African plan was a very well laid out plan from the beginning. And when Cyril was chosen to become the golden boy, that plan was going to run very smoothly until Jacob Zuma came into the fray. Part of the plan was to get Nelson Mandela released. This new political movement, the ANC, within the South African political landscape, although they were established much earlier, needed a leader that the world would absolutely love. And the negotiations with Nelson Mandela started in the early 80s already, under P.W. Botha. Now most people don't know this, but it just happens that I have family that actually worked in the prison services that was aware of the negotiations with Mandela when he was moved from Robben Island, and actually met with some of the highest officials in the country, certain business people, including the Oppenheimers, as well as intelligence people from around the world, to actually work on this plan for this transition. Initially, Nelson Mandela refused to lay down the armed struggle because this was one of the requirements that P.W. Botha set out. He said, I would release you. And there were 3 meetings when Nelson Mandela said that I don't want to be released because I won't give up the armed struggle. P.W. Botha said, if you give up the armed struggle and renounce it, you will be released. And Nelson Mandela refused. When the new negotiations started later under F.W. de Klerk, the plans were already laid out. Nelson Mandela would be the golden boy of the moment, but Cyril Ramaphosa would follow him up as president. He would be a young president. He would be a capable president in the hands of the world elite, and he would be very good at establishing this new world order philosophy within South Africa, and no one would know any better. Cyril Ramaphosa has been around for the greatest and biggest moments in South African history, especially in the build-up towards our democracy. He was a part of the team that took part of Nelson Mandela's release, the Welcoming Committee. He was there when Nelson Mandela gave his first speech. He was there with the negotiations at the CODESA. He was there when the Constitution was signed. Cyril Ramaphosa was involved everywhere. And he wasn't Nelson Mandela's next choice. He was the World Council's next choice. It had been decided a long time ago that Cyril Ramaphosa would be that man. So how did things go wrong? How did we first sit with the presidency with Thabo Mbeki? And how did Jacob Zuma follow him up? I will cover that in following videos. And you please need to subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon to get notifications so that you can follow the next videos in this series. And I want you to understand fully the role that our current President Cyril Ramaphosa is playing in changing the world that we live in, the South Africa we live in, and that he has global powers controlling him. That those global powers are his masters, that he sold his life to them a long time ago. They helped him build his fortune, which doesn't fall out of the sky. Look at Nelson Mandela. Look, when he was released, all the mansions he received. Where did those mansions come from? Go and have a look who funded those mansions and you will see the world powers at play. So anyone that thinks that we have a normal democracy and a normal parliament under this party system that we're in currently don't understand how the world government works. This world government headed by the Queen needs to be there for the New World Order to be established, for us to have a one world leader and for us to have a one world government with leaders representing all the different areas of the globe. The COVID-19 pandemic is but one of the means used by the world elite to establish this New World Order, to create a testing ground where they can actually prove their different systems, see how compliant people have become because of the schooling system. I will do individual videos on all of these different facets of the way that the New World Order is trying to establish itself within the South African and within the world market. So many people blame people that Cyril Ramaphosa himself has appointed to his cabinet for stopping him from achieving his noble goals. Well, people, I have news for you. He is at the head of everything that is happening. It was planned that way a long time ago, and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma has already had a stint as the leader of the African Union. Cyril was always going to follow her up. The Zumas did not play the New World Order game. Towards the end of the party, they made clear that the agenda of the New World Order does not sit well with them. And Jacob Zuma actively opposed all the New World Order agendas, although he initiated many of those programs earlier on. The Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, those signing of those agreements with the United Nations all happened under his tenure. But when he realized what was actually going on and that he was going to get the short end of the stick, especially when Cyril Ramaphosa was clear to be the golden boy, he went sour. He tried to make as much money as he can, and he will now try and expose many of these people in his court case. Make no mistake, Jacob Zuma knows a lot. He was head of intelligence of Inkonto Wesizwe initially, so he knows all the dirty secrets on everybody. And make no mistake, the third force that he spoke of, he knew very, very well who runs this country. And he knew it was not him. He knew that he just had to comply. And some of the things he could not get away with on his conscience. Have you ever thought where all this money has gone that the supposed Guptas has stolen? Just remember, the United Kingdom has been taking money from this country since the 1820, when the first British settlers landed at Melkbos and marched into the city of Cape Town. Ever since that day, they have only looked after their own interest. They have given us this Westminster-like system, this political party system, that has enabled gangs in parliament to fight each other, to divide this nation, so that they can keep on extracting from our mineral wealth, so that our country can remain destitute, that most of the masses are poor, struggling, and for us to never rise up as a global power, because we do have this potential. The British absolutely know this, and this is why they have people like Julius Malema in the EFF controlling all the leftist extremists. This is why there were people like Eugene Terblanche controlling the AWB, who were the right-wing extremists. None of these organizations will ever achieve anything because they were intelligence-driven. And I'm exposing this to you now so that you can open your eyes and see that what you see in the media, who is just a propaganda machine for the world elite, is mostly fake. If you have not seen it yourself filmed by a camera, it is probably not true. Cyril Ramaphosa will argue that he has done what is best for the people of South Africa. I don't think he has the mental intellect to actually understand what Agenda 21 and 2030 means. That these specific agendas are there to take away more and more freedom from the people. But then again, his past tells us that he was a staunch communist at the beginning, that he supported people like Frelimo, that he is still a socialist at heart, although he used communist means to find the way to transition our government to the constitutional democracy that it is today. But more on the constitution that I speak of later, how that constitution was formed, how Cyril was a part of that process, and how they built in Trojan horses that will absolutely take the power away from any adults in the country and hand over the power to the children under the age of 12 even, that they will have more power than their parents under the constitution, so that these New World Order agendas can be implemented without any problem. The Constitutional Court judges might be on our side, but they have to work with a flawed constitution, and this is where the problem lies. Cyril Ramaphosa will still implement many things without any hesitation, making as if he's a capitalist, when at heart he is a communist. In heart, in deed, and in action. And everyone that bows down to him and everything that he stands for is just that, his puppets. Cyril bows down to no one. He has the power of the world behind him, and he cannot wait to become the official leader of the African continent. Please subscribe to my channel 00 Des and click the bell icon so that you can receive notifications of new videos that are uploaded. This series will continue. There are many videos to follow. I have many things to still reveal. They are all on file and I'm working on them. Initially, I did this video in a completely different way and chose to do it in this format so that I could look you in the eye and you could actually see the emotions of how I feel as I relate the story of Cyril Ramaphosa to you. I don't think there's a more important thing for you to understand right now, that our president is a sellout to the people of South Africa, that he does not have your best interests at heart, that he is playing to a world organization that wants to implement something that will take the rights and freedoms for you to choose away completely and implement technology that will take all privacy out of your life.